The rain had been falling for hours, steady and relentless, its rhythm against the glass syncing with the hum in my head. I sat curled up on the worn armchair by the window, staring at the glow of the street lamp bending and blurring through the water. It was supposed to be just another quiet Friday night, me, a lukewarm cup of tea, and the kind of silence that didn't feel like peace, but rather something I was still learning to live with. Marcus's absence had become familiar in the way a scar does. Part of me, yet still tender when touched. It had been 3 months since we ended things, 3 months of trying to stitch up the places his presence used to fill. I thought I was getting better at being alone, or at least better at pretending I was. That's when I heard it, a knock. Not the quick, polite kind, but slow, deliberate, as if whoever was out there had all the time in the world. My first thought was that it had to be a mistake. No one came to my door unannounced, especially not this late, especially not on a night when the world outside looked washed clean of people. I hesitated, every self-preservation instinct telling me to ignore it. But curiosity, my oldest flaw, won out. When I opened the door, the night spilled in with the sound of the rain. He stood there, soaked to the bone, water running in rivulets down his dark hair, a travel bag slung over one shoulder. His eyes caught the porch light, a striking gray, sharp enough to make me forget for a second that I didn't know him. "Sorry," he said, his voice low, almost swallowed by the rain. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't urgent. My car broke down a few streets over. I've been walking for, God, I don't even know. I just need somewhere to wait until the tow truck gets here." I should have told him to try the diner down the road or the all-night gas station. That would have been the sensible thing. But there was something in the way his shoulders sagged, in the way the cold clung to him like it might never let go, that made me step back and nod. "Come in." The warmth of the apartment seemed to hit him all at once. He let out a quiet breath, almost like relief. I handed him a towel, watching the way his hands gripped it, long fingers, faint scrapes along the knuckles, like he'd been wrestling with more than just a car engine tonight. "I'm Caleb," I said. "Rowan," he replied, rubbing the towel through his hair. His voice was clearer now, but there was a weight behind it, something I couldn't name yet. The sound of the rain filled the spaces between our words. I made coffee more to have something to do then, because either of us needed it. When I handed him the mug, our fingers brushed. His were warm now, but I still felt the echo of the cold that had wrapped around him outside. "So, passing through?" I asked. "Something like that," he said, offering no details. He glanced around the apartment, not in the casual, curious way of a stranger taking in new surroundings, but more deliberate, as though cataloging what he saw. I tried not to notice. I told myself it didn't matter. The tow company sent a message saying it would be at least 2 hours. Rowan accepted the news without complaint, settling onto the couch, his bag at his feet. The storm outside showed no signs of letting up, each clap of thunder making the windows shiver. We talked, lightly at first, how long I'd been in town, what I did for work, his vague mention of traveling for personal reasons. He was careful, his answers just enough to keep the conversation alive, but never enough to pin down. Still, there was a calmness about him, a steady presence that made the small apartment feel strangely less empty. At one point, I caught him looking out the window, his expression unreadable. "Do you believe," he said slowly, "that people cross paths for a reason?" I almost laughed, but something in his tone stopped me. "I think sometimes we tell ourselves that to make sense of things," I said. "Otherwise, it's all just coincidence." He gave a faint smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Maybe. Or maybe some things are meant to happen, no matter what." For a moment, the rain felt quieter, as if it, too, was waiting for my answer. But I didn't have one. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight. Rowan leaned back against the couch, eyes half closed, the tension in his posture easing just a little. I studied him from my chair, telling myself it was just curiosity, the way you look at someone new and wonder where they've been, what they've seen. But I also knew I was wondering what it would feel like if this night had started differently, if the knock at my door had been the beginning of something I could trust. When the next rumble of thunder came, Rowan opened his eyes and looked directly at me. There was something in that gaze, an unspoken recognition I couldn't place that made my chest tighten. Neither of us said anything. The rain kept falling, and for reasons I couldn't explain, I felt that this night was not going to leave me the same. Rowan's clothes hung over the back of a chair, slowly dripping onto the towel I'd laid underneath. He'd kept his sweater on through most of the evening, but now sat in a faded t-shirt, the faint outline of a tattoo curling just under the sleeve. The rain still hammered the windows. The street outside washed in silver under the street lamps. I had offered him the couch for the night. It made more sense than sending him back out into the storm, and he'd accepted with a grateful nod, though I suspected he was the kind of man who didn't like asking for help. The hours stretched in a way they hadn't for me in a long time. Usually, nights like this passed in silence, filled with the hum of my refrigerator and the distant sound of cars on wet pavement. But Rowan's presence shifted the air. He didn't demand conversation, yet somehow drew it out of me. I found myself telling him about the years I'd spent here, how I'd ended up in this small apartment after leaving a bigger city, glossing over the fact that the move was less about choice and more about needing to get away from Marcus. Rowan listened in a way that felt unhurried, his gray eyes steady on me. There was no impatient nodding or distracted glances, just the weight of someone actually hearing the words. When I returned the question, asking about his travels, he gave me a half smile and said, "I've been between places, following work, sometimes people, not really staying anywhere long enough to make it feel like home." His voice dipped at the last part, and I wondered if there was someone waiting for him somewhere, or if that was the problem. No one was. The lights flickered once, then again, before the apartment went dark. For a second, neither of us moved, the sudden absence of the hum and glow making the storm outside sound louder. I fumbled for the box of candles in the drawer, by the sink, lighting a few, and setting them on the coffee table. The warm, flickering light softened the room, shadows stretching along the walls. Rowan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, watching the flame nearest him. "Power outages always make me feel like I'm in another time," he said. "Like the world slows down for a bit, forces you to notice things." It was true. The quiet felt deeper, the air warmer. I brought over a blanket, sitting at the other end of the couch. The fabric brushed against both of us when I draped it, and his knee touched mine briefly. Neither of us moved away. Our conversation turned to smaller things, favorite films, music we grew up with, places we'd go if time and money were endless. Every so often, Rowan would pause mid-sentence, his gaze dropping to his phone when it buzzed. He never checked it in front of me, just turned it over so the screen faced down. One of those times, curiosity tugged at me. "Expecting someone?" I asked lightly. "Not really," he said, but his tone had the faintest edge to it, a quickness I didn't miss. I told myself it was none of my business. He was a stranger, after all, and strangers had their own worlds I wasn't entitled to. Still, I felt a small, irrational sting that he wasn't fully here. Eventually, the conversation slowed, and Rowan stretched out across the couch, one arm folded under his head. "Wake me if the tow truck calls," he murmured, eyes closing. I sat in my chair again, the candlelight catching on the planes of his face, the damp hair falling across his forehead. He looked peaceful, unguarded, in sleep, and for a fleeting moment I thought about what it would be like to have someone like him stay, not just for a night, but for the mornings, after the quiet dinners, the comfort of knowing you weren't weathering storms alone. The sound of his phone broke the stillness, a sharp digital chime. I glanced at it, only because it was closer to me than to him. The name on the screen stopped me cold. Marcus. I stared at it until the light faded and the screen went black again, leaving only the candlelight. My breath felt heavier, the storm outside suddenly less like background noise and more like a warning. I didn't wake him. I didn't even move. But the warmth in the room shifted, replaced by something I couldn't name yet, something that whispered that this night had just become much more complicated. The rain hadn't stopped by morning. It had only softened into a steady, persistent curtain that blurred the view outside my window. Rowan was already awake when I stepped out of my bedroom, sitting at the kitchen table with a mug between his hands. He smiled faintly when he saw me, And for a moment, it almost felt like we were two people sharing a quiet morning after years of knowing each other. I busied myself with breakfast, eggs, toast, coffee, trying to focus on the simple rhythm of movement. But no matter how I tried, the image from last night lingered. Marcus's name glowing on Rowan's phone, sharp as lightning in the dark. I told myself there could be an innocent explanation. Marcus had friends I'd never met. Rowan could be one of them. But even that felt like too neat of a coincidence. We ate in relative silence. Rowan asked about my work, about the projects I was working on. He listened with that same easy attentiveness, but there was a shadow in my own responses now, a cautiousness I couldn't hide. When I finally asked how long he'd been traveling, he leaned back in his chair, stretching his legs under the table. "A couple of months," he said. "Went south for a while, stayed with a friend, then came back up this way." His pause before the word friend was small but deliberate, as if he was testing whether I'd ask more. I didn't. Instead, I changed the subject, asking about the tattoo on his arm. He laughed, rolling up his sleeve to show me the full design, an abstract mix of lines and shapes that somehow resembled both a map and a compass. "It's a reminder," he said, "that even if you get lost, you can still find your way somewhere worth being." Something about that made my chest tighten. I thought of the months after Marcus, when I wasn't sure there was anywhere left worth going. I thought about the strange comfort of having Rowan here now, even if it was temporary. We ended up in the living room, the storm keeping us indoors. Rowan noticed my guitar leaning against the wall and asked if I played. I told him I hadn't in a long time, but he picked it up with a kind of familiarity that made me watch more closely. He strummed softly, testing the strings, then played a melody I knew instantly. It was a song Marcus used to play on lazy Sunday afternoons, back when the days felt simple and love felt solid. I froze. "Where did you learn that?" Rowan glanced up, almost startled. "It's just an old song. Heard it from someone a while back." "Someone?" I repeated, my voice thinner than I intended. "Marcus used to play that. All the time." He gave a small shrug, as if the overlap was meaningless, but I could see the way his gaze shifted, just enough to avoid mine. I told myself to let it go, to not start a confrontation I wasn't ready for. But every small detail I'd ignored until now pressed in, the quick glance at his phone, the vague answers, the way he seemed to know exactly how to make me feel seen. Later, while I was in the kitchen refilling our coffee, Rowan's voice dropped low in the other room. I couldn't make out all of it, but I caught enough through the soft hum of the rain. "Yes, I'm here." "No, he doesn't know yet." I stood frozen by the counter, my pulse loud in my ears. When I walked back in, Rowan was sitting casually on the couch, phone back in his pocket. "Work call," he said before I could ask. "Nothing important." The urge to believe him fought with the weight in my chest. I nodded, saying nothing, but the air between us had shifted. That night, after Rowan had gone to sleep, I sat at the dining table with my laptop open, the glow of the screen throwing long shadows across the room. I typed his name into the search bar, not sure what I expected to find. It didn't take long. A photo appeared, Rowan standing beside Marcus, both smiling under a sunlit sky. The timestamp was from 2 weeks ago. I stared at it until the screen blurred, the rain outside echoing the thrum in my chest. Whatever story Rowan had brought to my door last night was not the whole truth, and now I had to decide whether I wanted to hear the rest of it. I didn't sleep. The rain eased sometime before dawn, but the heaviness in my chest didn't. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee growing cold between my hands, staring at the photo on my laptop one more time just to be sure I hadn't imagined it. Rowan and Marcus, standing close enough that it was impossible to call them casual acquaintances. 2 weeks ago. By the time Rowan stirred from the couch, the morning light had turned pale and clear, painting the apartment in a quiet that felt too fragile to last. He rubbed his eyes, smiled faintly when he saw me, and said, "Morning." "Morning." I replied, though my voice was sharper than I intended. I didn't bother with small talk. Instead, I closed the laptop, pushed it toward him, and tapped the photo, still glowing on the screen. "You want to explain this?" He looked at it for a long moment, No flinch, no denial. Just a slow exhale. I was going to tell you, he said. When? My voice rose before I could stop it. After you left? After you reported back to him? It's not like that. Rowan said quickly, leaning forward. Marcus, he reached out to me. We've known each other for a while. He told me you'd been having a hard time. He asked me to check on you. I laughed, short, humorless. Check on me? Like I'm some assignment. That wasn't how it felt, he said, his tone tightening. I didn't expect to. He stopped himself, jaw working. I didn't expect to like you. The words hit harder than I wanted them to. So, what, this was an accident? You show up at my door, you say all the right things, you play the song he used to play, and it's all just coincidence? Rowan shook his head. The song? I didn't realize it would mean something to you. I swear, Caleb, I didn't come here to hurt you. But once I met you, once I saw, he trailed off again, eyes searching mine. You're not what Marcus made you out to be. You're more. I wanted to believe him. God, a part of me wanted to reach across the table, to tell him to stay, to see if there was a way to salvage whatever strange, fleeting connection we'd built. But the thought of Marcus somewhere out there, knowing Rowan had been here, made my skin crawl. You need to go, I said, finally. My voice was steady this time, the decision firm even as it scraped against something in me. Rowan's expression tightened, but he didn't argue. He stood, slinging his bag over his shoulder. At the door, he hesitated. For what it's worth, none of this was fake. Not for me. I didn't answer. I couldn't. He stepped outside, and the door clicked shut behind him. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the quiet, the absence of rain, making the silence louder. Through the window, I watched him walk down the street until he turned a corner and was gone. The apartment felt smaller without him, but also somehow cleaner, as if a weight had been lifted and replaced with another kind, one I could carry on my own. Hours later, as the sky began to shift toward evening, there was another knock. Softer this time. I opened the door quickly, some ridiculous part of me expecting to see him again. But the hallway was empty, just the scent of damp air, the faint echo of footsteps fading somewhere beyond. I stood there a moment longer, letting the cool air wash over me before closing the door. Whatever Rowan had been blessing, warning, or both, he was gone now, and I was left with the only thing I'd had before he came, myself. And maybe, I thought as I turned back to the quiet of the apartment, that would have to be enough.